Hi everyone, it's Adam with Miles Restoration, and today I've got a client project for you. It's a coffee dresser that a client brought me. It's solid poplar. There's no veneer on it or anything like that. And it was originally, I will, I don't really know if you'd say painted or stained, but it was like a combination, like solid color white stain on it that a lot of people just don't really like the look of it. So she found a picture on the internet that was like it was a black case, like a lacquered black case, and then the drawer fronts were stained and just sealed. And I said I could do that, and I thought I could get pretty close. And the end product compared to the picture, I think it looks very similar, and so did she. And she was really happy with it. So I did my normal process for painting for the case, and then for the drawers, it was a little bit different. I had to strip all that paint out of there because I didn't think that would look good and get it ready for staining the drawer fronts. This is Centurion's vinyl sealer, and I originally used my Apollo, but I found out that I blew the seals out on that gun, so I had to switch to my Fuji. So this product out of an HVLP does not lay out very well, and I've kind of just resigned myself to the fact that usually I'm just going to have to sand it back if I want to use it. I'm probably going to buy a cheap airless to spray it out of in the future, but for now I'm just using this gun, and I just sand it back. After two coats it looks kind of orange peely, and I just sand that out of it and I move on. And really, it's a very easy sanding primer, so it doesn't bother me that it doesn't lay out particularly well. Obviously on camera it looks okay, but that's from a far distance. If you got up close to it, it would look a lot worse. Okay, so from here I'll be using a super fine pad, and I just use like a foam pad that's, more flexible and contours to the surfaces on the curved areas. And on the flat areas I use a firm pad, but it's all super fine. So my original idea was to use Benjamin Moore Command and satin, and I actually didn't end up going with this product for the final coat because for some reason there were some problems with it. It just didn't really, the tint wasn't mixing with the product well, and it was coming out on the surface. So I actually had to sand it off. Well, I had to sand it back flat, and then I used emerald urethane on top of it, but I actually didn't get any film of it because it was just kind of stressful with the painting not going well. So I wasn't really focused on filming. So they only had some quart cans at my local Sherwin-Williams, and I got a bunch of quarts and I dumped them in here and strained them. I'm gonna spray it through my airless. It just is a lot easier for me, and I'm kind of getting to the point where I like to use my airless whenever I can. Just all the problems that come with HVLP, I'm just kind of over it. And airless can be a lot simpler, and it forces you to put a sufficient amount of coating on because really there's no way to go any less and not put adequate coating and get the problems that come from that, like noticeable dust particles in your finish. So yeah, it's a lot quieter in here. That's one thing I really like about using the airless is that I don't have a turbine or an air compressor going while I'm spraying. It's just so much quieter and more peaceful. Also, I do have to kind of think about it when I'm spraying with an airless because it's easy to catch a run. And I'm using a 210 tip, and that's pretty much what I use for everything. Although I think I'm about to move down to a 208. And here it is while it's still wet. It's got a really nice look to it. It lays out well. It's just so much simpler than HVLP. No thinning, no messing with air. And that's kind of just what I think. For now, I'll probably stick with the airless. Maybe eventually I'll get like an air assisted airless, but that's later on down the road. So these drawers were like a nightmare. All of that paint that was on there, it was primed in some areas and not primed in others. So part of the paint came off easy, but if you remember from the first clip, there was like a black paint all over the inside of it. It took me a whole day to strip out that paint and clean it off. I really did the best that I could with it. I tried. It had a very thin veneer that was like cedar in the bottom of the drawer front, so I tried to preserve that as best as I could, but it was very difficult. And I sanded everything with down to about 180, about 150 grit, and then I raised a grain with water and I mixed up some general finishes stain. This is a combination of pecan and antique brown, and it's pretty close to the picture that she sent me, and it'll actually be a little bit lighter than this drawer front that you see here because I think this is one of the first ones that I tested, and so I kind of amended the stain a couple times, as you'll see. And I just actually pulled the stain out of the ones that I tested it on, used some water, mineral spirits, or whatever I needed to get it out, sanded it back, and then restained them all in the same color that I ended up with, which is like a combination of probably more pecan than antique brown, but it looked good, and it looked even better whenever it was clear coated. So another thing that I started doing was I just spray the sides on a large dresser and I spray the tops later because it's just not effective to try and do both. You end up with overspray on the top and it just leaves like a rough bumpy finish. So I'll just mask off the top and then I'll spray it later, and I just spray it with the same process. So the client requested that I paint the hardware gold, so I use my ultrasonic cleaner to do the majority of the cleaning, and I'll just mix a little degreaser and water in there, throw them in there, and let them sit for 15 minutes and rinse them out later. And in the meantime, here's a look at the dresser, what it's looking like so far, and I am going to finish cleaning the hardware and the sink, and I just use a Scotch-Brite to get them ready for painting, and then I'll paint them gold. It's going to be kind of not too pretty on the first coat, but then after you sand back that first coat and paint it, it'll look a lot better. Okay, so this is Centurion's high build acrylic sealer, and it's a water-based product, and I'm going to spray it on pretty heavy to the drawer fronts, and this is after the stain is dried for a few hours. Just a final kind of close-up look at the hardware. This was after 2 coats of gold. They look pretty good. So after multiple coats of sealer, I'm pretty sure that I'm not going to burn through the stain. So now I can kind of flatten out the sealer with the Surf Prep Superfine pad. And you still have to be careful with it, but it's a little bit easier. I put probably 3 coats on at this point. So this is going to be the final coat. It's Centurion's top coat, the 400 series. It's a 1K acrylic, and it's in satin. And I'm putting it on with an airless, a 210, and I'll put it on a little bit heavier, probably about 6 or 7 mils. And yeah, I mean, it looks a lot better that way. It just takes longer to dry. You're not going to get the normal dry time if you put it on that thick. So carefully putting the hardware back on at this point, and yeah, I think it looks pretty good. You know, not everyone's a fan of painting mid-century furniture, I understand that, but in this case, you know, it had a whitewash solid color stain on it. I definitely think if you are going to paint it, it's definitely the best case in a scenario like this that was not a veneered, you know, product necessarily. It's just like a solid color paint. But yeah, I mean, I love the way it looks. It's pretty to me. You know, the client loves it, and that's what's the most important thing about it. And yeah, I really like the way it turned out. So if you enjoy this kind of content and you want to see more of this and construction related projects, please subscribe.